Hi everyone, I'm Hanobi Schoonover, the Training and Resource Coordinator for Redwind Consulting, and I'd like to welcome you to the webinar. Before we begin, for those who may not know, Redwind is a nonprofit organization that provides tribal technical assistance on a variety of programs, including but not limited to responding to urban natives, children and youth, and other abuse. This ranges from policy review via email to site visits. If you are interested, you can contact me at honovi@red-wind.net. That's hanovi@red-wind.net. As this states, this project was supported by grant number 2017 TAAX-K023, which is awarded by the Office of Violence Against Women, U.S. Department of Justice. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this publication, program, and exhibition are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women. This training is a part of our Children and Youth project. And we'll now go over the presenters. Presenting with us today are Amber Warman, Victoria Ybanez, and Rebecca Baylog. Amber Warman is the Children and Youth Project Coordinator for Redwind Consulting. She is an enrolled member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe in South Dakota, where she grew up in both the cities of Ohio and on the reservations of North Dakota. She graduated from the United Tribes Technical College with a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice, and previously worked as a CNA providing care for adults and children with disabilities, giving direct care and mentorship to youth in corrections and shelter. She was also an advocate for abused families, victims of sexual assault, and human trafficking. Victoria Ybanez, who is Dene, Apache, and Mexican, is the Executive Director of Redwind and has been working to end violence against American Indian and Alaskan Native people for 35 years. She has been coordinating and providing tribal technical assistance for the Office of Violence Against Women, which current projects include the development and implementation of tribal-specific shelter and transitional housing programs, assisting tribal programs program delivery, which includes addressing children impacted by domestic violence and teen dating violence, as well as working with tribal college and university campuses in developing holistic responses to sexual assault. She developed the National Tribal Advocate Center, which is the curriculum for each training and serves as the lead faculty. And finally, we have Rebecca Baylog. Rebecca Baylog has a deep-rooted identity as a survivor advocate. She brings over 20 years of healthy relationships and anti-violence work through local shelter services, hotline management, national and grassroots activism, and youth engagement. She has been a facilitator of TA and TR in various capacities, which include domestic violence, sexual assault, racial justice, sex trafficking, homelessness intervention, reproductive justice, economic equity and justice, intergenerational trauma, and many more. She invests in the restoration of sovereignty for Native people to ensure safety for future generations. She's presenting today as a consultant through Hybrid Love Stories and Survivor Leader. This event does have captioning, which you'll need to manually turn on. And with the amount of presenters and attendees we have today, we recommend turning on the presenter view, which is going to be in your settings, the little bar that you have. If you have any questions or comments, you can put them into the chat box or click the little hand icon. And we will also have areas where you will be able to jump in. And I'll now turn it over to our presenters.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. Welcome, everyone. Today is February 2nd. We're 2 days into Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. And one of my favorite Facebook memes is gratitude is medicine. So I want to say wopila and thank you to Redwind for inviting me here today to share. I am a child abuse survivor. I'm a domestic violence survivor, I've had a life, right? So I've been in the movement for 22 years now, and I really enjoy when we get to come together, even though it's the pandemic and we're in a Zoom environment. We're doing the best we can, keeping our families and communities safe. So I'm really grateful that you took time out today to join us to talk about teen dating violence. So gratitude is medicine. Hopefully we can communicate together in a good way. There may be moments where we feel like the conversation is feeling, right, of our own experiences, if not ourselves, our family and friends. So hopefully we can be together as relatives today in a good way. I also want to apologize for any elders in the space or spiritual leaders or healers. I don't mean to speak before you. We're in this Zoom session. So I just wanted to offer an opening prayer. And this is something that I think is really fitting today, as there are many childhood violence survivors advocates today, and we're together. This is something I hope lands on your heart and your families. Even the seasons form a great circle, and they're changing and always come back again to where they were. That the life of a human is a circle from childhood to childhood. And so it is in everything where our empowerment moves. So Mitakiase. Just wanted to give that offering for opening, setting the tone and opening in a good way with, a right prayer for our time together. One of the other things I wanted to open with, so I do other work in this movement. 22 years in, I've done shelter, hotline work, direct service, and national training and technical assistance. And the youth has always been woven deeply into my work for obvious reasons. And also that shelter management was huge because youth and their identities, as a runaway myself, I understand what shelters mean and what you all mean to youth when they need help. It's a really complex journey. So what does hybrid love mean? And so as Hanavi shared, thank you. I'm not going to go over my bio again because it's just so awkward to hear it. But I am Native and Gypsy. My mother is technically 3 tribes. My father is a full-blooded Hungarian Gypsy. So I'm a hybrid love story, and that's what I call it. And then you all have hybrid love stories too, because you know your ancestors, you know your families may be blended families, you may be multiracial, multi-faith, right? Many people have multi-faiths. And then also being a survivor advocate, being a hybrid love story is all of you, because we do this work in this new lingo, right? It wasn't around 10 years ago. Intersections. The word intersections abounds across our movement. When we have domestic violence with sexual violence, sex trafficking with domestic violence, substance abuse with runaway homeless youth, all of those intersections. So it's about a hybrid love story. And I want us to all honor what that means in this space together, that we have multiple things happening at one time. I also want to open with a youth topic and philosophy that was born from the Unity Conference. And I'm not sure if you're all familiar. The United Native, I'm going to butcher it, and I don't mean to. The Unity Conference is the biggest Native youth conference in our country for all tribes. And out of the workshops that I was doing at the time through the Native Love Project, which is National Indigenous Women's Resource Center Youth Project. So I put that there with the LGBT flag for a reason, just to give them a shout out for the opportunities and some of the philosophies that were born with working with the youth in the workshops during that conference. There was a concept of honor society, which is mainstream, regular America, right? You get good grades, you're in the debate team, you're in the hierarchy of school politics. We know what honor society means, right? But in working with youth in those workshops that had tears and anger and frustration and vulnerability, we created that space so youth could have their own culture, and we were just there to support them along the way. Safe schools, the first word there on the top left. And that honor society for some of these kids means knowing their traditional medicines, knowing their language, knowing their songs. Whether they had the academic scores or were on the debate team, they brought an honor society to a different level. And that means really including them in the conversations for them to create their own leadership in their environment, in the youth culture, right? So I hope that makes sense. Also, today we're going to talk a little bit about the pandemic, because it sure as heck changed my life. And I'm sure it's changed all of your lives in a lot of really difficult ways. Even the way we're doing our work today has been adapted to this pandemic. And then that leads to digital safety and equaling healthy native teen relationships. So I don't want to keep on bantering on without the invitation. Really hoping Redwin and Hybrid Love Stories, me and you all can have discussions today and storytell, bring what's happening in, if you're sitting in suburbia, tell your story. In rural, tell your story. On the reservation or in the cities. Like, this is honoring youth culture to end teen dating violence, because it's changed in the youth culture in the schools, in the pandemic, and definitely online. So if you want to turn on your video, that's great. If you want to turn on your audio, that's great. Or put it in the chat, whatever feels comfortable for your wellness, that's awesome. So I'm going to take a breath, have a sip of my coffee, and could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So the flow of the day, we're going to have discussions, and we're going to offer digital breakout sessions where you can contribute in really interesting ways using digital platforms. So that'll come a little bit later. And then we're going to take a wellness break. Because our time together is 4 hours long, we're going to put a solid 30 minutes in the middle for your water, to exercise, to stretch, take care of your dogs, your babies. A lot of you are working in home offices, so do your thing. So we're giving a really good 30-minute break in between. We do have 3 sessions today. We're going to break them up. Again, please offer what you can share to help other advocates, prosecutors, attorneys, executive directors, all the things. We're all doing this work together for you. So please chime in. Next slide. Yeah, thank you for the audio note. And Brittany, did you want to describe the word cloud just a little bit for folks?
Sure, so we're gonna go ahead and put a link in the chat. And this is to a Mentimeter, so we're just kind of gathering your thoughts in one space. If you want to participate, go ahead and click the link.
For the question, thank you so much for that. This is new to me too, but I think it's really awesome. So the link is in the chat. So I'm sure y'all know what a word cloud looks like. And I don't have my camera on, apologies. So if you add what is the most important factor to you in your journey as a survivor or an advocate or executive director, what is the most important factor being a youth advocate? If you click the link and type it in, it'll just start popping up, which I think is pretty great. Is it shelter? Okay, we have some. Oh, awesome. Thank you. So peace, right? Which compassion comes with peace. There it just showed up. Having a voice, courage, teachable moments, and empathy. Please keep them coming in. Click that link. Hero. Hell yeah. What else do we have? Safety, honor where the youth are at, identity. Yeah. Keep them coming. I love it. Relationships, being a mentor. Yep. Being supportive. Being non-judgmental. Yeah, these are awesome. These are all the things. Safety, listening, encouragement, being a guide, knowledge, following through. Oh, that's a big one these days. Culture, courage. Yep. Brilliant. A safe space to share. That's huge. As a young person myself, that was my biggest barrier. I didn't have a safe space. And that's where you all come in, right? Growth, trust, being supportive, co-parenting with family. Yep. These are awesome. Listening. Responsible. Yeah. Sorry, I'm making faces. I do that when I read. Love. Love that one. Consistency. Yep. Use my voice to be heard. Correct. Yep. Leadership. Authentic. Yes. Keep them coming. These are really awesome. Thank you for participating in the word cloud. I think we can honor our time. Keep them coming in. It'll keep populating and we'll have that. There'll be a toolkit based on your voices in our conversation today, and also voices from youth that are surviving these days. And then surviving these days is not like when I was surviving as a kid or a youth or a teenager. Times are so different. So we're going to talk about some of that today. Can we have the next slide also, please? Thank you. Apologies, my computer just wanted to do this big install, go figure. So I hope we can really spend time together today as relatives and have conversations. We know sometimes we get Zoom fatigue. A little bit of housekeeping. If you're not comfortable with your video on, that's cool. Your audio on or off, that's fine. The chat space is available. We can read your comments. Happy to do that. But we really want to be connected today because the topics are connected. Okay, so we know we want to expand our knowledge on our current realities, historical impacts, and the emerging issues. With Native youth that have their own culture within their schools, the communities, the altars, the powwows, the tournaments, the basketball, the skateboarding, right? Where youth are, they have their own built families, their cliques, for lack of a better word, they have a youth culture. So we want to connect the dots and how do we support them and lift up their voices? And that's our objective today. We want to define the basics of what we know and share what we know with each other, because it's really interesting, whether it's suburbia or the city or on the res or in the mountains here in Pennsylvania where I'm sitting, there's going to be common issues because we're all living online, and that's like being in one big space together. So I think that's a great link also. And how do we operate as advocates in all of these spaces, and how do we support them when they're living in their own culture from a culture, right? Next slide, please. So why should we look at healthy teen relationship and prevention differently? Because learning is about seeing things from a different perspective. And the author wrote, my role is to help people improve their vision. And at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. For all of those that have family that has had trauma and tragedy and suffering and healing and the healing journey, our youth are too. So that's one of the other things about that concept, that philosophy about hybrid love, is that we can't forget who we were when we survived what we survived and what our healing journey is. Because it's not going to be incredibly different from what youth today are going through. Even though I didn't have internet, you probably didn't have internet, and the journey might be, you know, in the details separate, but at the end of the day, it's about being able to reach out for help, like that word cloud, finding compassion, mentorship, love, trust, culture, all the things that maybe we didn't have because the movement was quite young back in the day. And now the youth are really a part of our journey, building something together with them, for them. So it's all about improving our vision. I want to just take a breath and ask if anyone else wants to chime in on why should we look at teen dating prevention differently than adult advocacy. And I'll just give you all a minute to chime in.
Do you want us to add it on the chat?
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay. Video, audio, chat, whatever is comfortable. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I'll just, since I'm already talking. So I am really happy to be attending this right now. I feel like we should look at it differently. I work with youth in foster care who are often targeted for trafficking. And I think that the prevention piece for healthy relationships needs to be there just so they can understand healthy versus unhealthy, right? I think that a lot of the youth that I work with, they see relationships that are pretty toxic, but they're used to that. And so that's what they gravitate to.
That's a wonderful comment, Rachel. Just chiming in here. I think that often today, as a mother of teenage boys, right, and them starting relationships at such a young age, I really want to promote those healthy boundaries for them. And how do we do that as parents? Making sure that we're inviting their partners, their new partners into our homes and really taking a role in the relationship that they have with their partner. I don't think that our parents did that type of stuff with us. I mean, personally, I grew up in foster care, so they didn't do that with me. But as a different kind of mom and wanting to be the kind of mom I didn't have, I want to make sure that I support my son's relationship in a positive way, that we include his girlfriend in Christmas, we get her something small, or we just remind her that she's precious to us just as much as my children are precious, and that relationship has somewhere to grow from, that they have a standard from the beginning, that they are both a blessing in our home. And even if the relationship doesn't work out, we hope they maintain a good friendship. So just kind of putting those healthy boundaries in place is one of the ways we do it in our home. And I'm just happy to be here today and look forward to listening and learning.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Did anyone else want to chime in on how teen advocacy is different? How we do prevention work differently?
Hi, Kiana here from Cherokee. Working with the youth here, you know, there are so many that are struggling to find some type of stability and normalcy and create their own family. And that's when, you know, they have their never-ending love with one another, which like the lady that spoke first, you know, talked about following the same path as the parents or the environment of gravitating toward abuse, you know, because that's all they know. But I think that, you know, taking that into account, we've got to remember that they're wanting the same things the adults do, you know, love, safety, appreciation, acceptance, and they want that stability. So if we can try to remember that when working with them, I think we can get a little further than if we just treat them as a child. Of course, being the mother bear I am, I just want to take them under my wing and protect them and shield them from all the bad things they've experienced, because I too am a survivor. And I feel like if I can treat them like a person, they do have thoughts, and just because they make a bad decision doesn't make them a bad person. But just my thought.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That is so true. Talking with them as people instead of children, that can be, if you've ever been ordered around or told to zip it, like we're not in that world anymore, thank goodness. Thank you.
And Kiana, as you were talking, the thing that crossed my mind about why we should do it different is that with our youth is that often their autonomy is not heard and respected. And we're challenged, I think, in terms of how do we do this work where we're respecting their autonomy and supporting them as they're making choices, and help make sure that they have multiple options to choose from.
I agree, Victoria. I totally agree. And it's so hard at times to find that balance of remember, you know, they are still children that need guidance and direction, but they've been their own parent the majority of their lives, so they don't see themselves as needing guidance or as, you know, an adolescent. And it can be so difficult to get that trust sometimes, because they have their own shell. Of course, they have their walls, they're protecting themselves, and I can completely relate to that. So it's finding that balance of where do we go from here to help you create the space you are craving, and everyone is safe and everything is legal and things are being taken care of appropriately.
Thank you so much. There's another comment too. Oh yeah, wow. So let's give a disclaimer as relatives, that opening prayer, right? That we're in a cycle. My inner child gets hurt sometimes, and sometimes I cry on webinars, which I know isn't the most professional thing, but I'm making true I statements. And so we're use language that's real. We don't need to fluff it, right? We want to be gentle with each other, but truthful. So some of the language just is what it is. And I want to share in the comments today, teens, we have seen them on media, and they have learned to use violence, for example, in schools when they hurt each other and other teens experiencing bullying. Can we say social media, right? Like the amount of toxic violence, right? And the revenge porn and sexting and all of these things I didn't have. So just being empathetic, I'm also have teenage boys. And then another comment, which is the language. We're just going to keep it real. Unfortunately, resorting to, doesn't like to say it, but killing each other. We also know suicide is a huge part of teen bullying. And with social media, your whole character can be assassinated through groupthink and people not thinking for themselves. And unfortunately, we know in teen dating, when perpetrators really want to go the extra mile of the violence, it'll be through bullying. That's what's happening with social media. So thank you for naming that. And yes to crying. These are hard stories. And sometimes people have taught me not to use the word trigger because it's also harm doing. But I don't have a better replacement. So if that offends you, I apologize. Just trying to keep it real. Thank you for all of those comments. It really draws a map to the complexities of being a parent and a survivor advocate and social media and providing leadership and resources to the kids and making sure the youth today have a place to go. Because a lot of adults still don't have a place to go, am I right? And when we're talking about youth, I was a runaway. I don't know if anyone else online was. But that was because there was absolutely no support from friends or family, and I couldn't name it. I didn't have a safe space. So again, that hybrid love story, we have to remember what we survived, and that'll make us better advocates and better parents, right?
Absolutely, Rebecca. I just want to say you're doing great. Thank you so much for talking today.
Thank you. Oh, that's a good record. Thank you. Shaka Khan Gordon. Love that name, man. I use activated instead of triggered. That's awesome. Thank you. That will help me. Thank you.
We were also taught by an elder to say a bad memory, because a trigger like a gun can hurt you. And so the thought process is that even though it's a bad memory, it cannot hurt you because it is a memory. It's in the past and we are here in the future and you're safe now. So as an advocate, just reminding people sometimes that in the moment right now, you're safe here with me in this room. Maybe not always, and maybe not when they go home, but at this moment. And sometimes they need to hear that just to be reminded of their own personal safety.
That's so true. Thank you so much. That kind of, I don't know why, but I just took a left turn in my mind about mandated reporting too, that the same disclaimer could be said when students are in an environment with mandated reporters, to just give that disclosure and saying, you know, I'm going to use this language so you understand the process that is connected to this conversation, and give them an opportunity to have that autonomy instead of someone coming to ask for help, and then, man, bad things can happen in states that have really bad track records for the foster care system and child welfare. That was I call them popcorn thoughts. So that came up while you were saying that. Did you want to expand on that?
I just keep going back. I mean, because like there's been so much good conversation. And then I'm like, when we think about why we need to look at healthy teen relationships and prevention differently, today's my birthday. So in that I'm a former foster care. And so there were no calls from my parents today, and I miss them. And growing up, like you mentioned, being a runaway and on the streets and different things, myself included. So it's crazy we have that connection as well. And it's, I didn't say the birthday thing. Thank you so much for the birthday wishes, but it's more about, my mother didn't have domestic violence services. She didn't have, she was 15 and she was forced to marry her abuser, which was my dad. I think about her being 15 with a 24-year-old man and her parents pushing her down the aisle. I think about my grandmother, her mother, who would be my full-blooded relative in Lakota way. My grandmother, you know, I'm not full-blooded. So going back to that, where it began, and her growing up in residential school, we like to think about generational and historical trauma so long ago. You know, a lot of times, unfortunately, our Indigenous history, we're talked about in a past tense, like we're not here right now. And why we need to teach teens healthy relationships is because my grandmother just 2 generations ago grew up in boarding school without parents, without love and affection, and without good role models. And so it started back then, even though she had 2 parents, because she was taken from them. And so then when we start moving forward, it hasn't been so many generations that I am now trying to repair that cycle of violence in our family. And that's hard too, because when you start to break that cycle, a lot of times you're pushed out because the people beside you, your family, the people you love, unfortunately are still stuck in that addiction. And so for me, as an advocate, as a mother, I am always on my boys about linking that generational and historical trauma, not to everything, but to everyday life, so they can see it and so they can understand how their relationships moving forward are so important to me, because I want them to have a healthy family. I want to bring closure. I want my mom to know that she's a good grandmother. And even though she maybe wasn't the best mother, it's not all her fault. There's some healing that needs to go forward. And I think a lot of us are in that same boat, because y'all are here. We're all in the same, at least decade at this time. So like, as we move forward, we have a lot of repair work to do. And so that's why building healthy teen relationship is so important, because as Indigenous people, we're always still thinking 7 generations ahead. And in 7 generations, I hope that there is no more violence for our kids.
Holy, that was awesome. Thank you. That's so true, right? We're at this in between. There's generations of the in-between, but we keep somehow going farther, breaking more silence, making big changes. Thank you so much. I want to also read comments so I don't lose them. I live and work in a county with alarming rates of child removal, in my opinion, and it's probably activated in me due to my grandmother being taken by the government as a child. So I feel that it's in my body to still be with these kids. I use restorative justice and circle processes in the prevention work, because to me, this is about healing work, not just prevention. Yes. Thank you so much. And then another comment, keep it real, sending hugs. I was also a runaway as well at 14 in there. Ended up in DV relationships for 25 years. My disappearance from school was not even noticed. Ugh. I have severe abandonment issues that have impacted choices in relationships. And that is it. Like, dunk. That is an awesome comment. We know in doing this work, we know the Duluth wheel of domestic violence, little pie chart. Now there's a pie chart for trafficking and murdered and missing and sexual violence. But in that pie chart is just the circle, not in the most positive light, but it's the cycle of violence, right? I was 5 when I said to myself, I will never beat my children. I will never harm my children. I made the decision of what kind of mom I was going to be at 5. But there comes with privilege with that, because I did have 2 loving grandparents, and they gave me just enough support that I could even think those thoughts when I was a child. And that's what you all do as advocates, right? You're that one person that changes the trajectory of the cycles of violence. And tons of happy birthdays. I see that too. That's awesome. There was also a question if we can share the slides. We sure can. I'm sure there's going to be an email list for the registration, so we'll get these slides to you. And there will also be a recording with Red Wind, so just heads up. Okay, let's all just take a minute. If you can, just do a stretch and 1 deep breath in, up, down. If you need to stand up, whatever it is, just take a breath and a stretch so we can keep wellness in this work. All right. With that, next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. So how is it all connected? And some of y'all have been doing this work for so long, or survivor leaders, so you know some of this. And we may have new recruits in the movement, so we just want to balance that spectrum. So how is this stuff connected? We know school or youth culture is a territory, and it's their territory. They have their own language, their own songs, their own music, dance styles, where to hang out, how to hang out, and who's their own built families outside of their nuclear families, altar or powwow community. So that is a territory, a youth territory that we visit. And then teen dating in a pandemic has changed leaps and bounds, not only for, I'm not sitting in an office right now, right? Many of you aren't sitting in an office. So even our work has changed. We know that there have been shelters, tribal programs, urban programs that had to shelter in place. So there was limited services and access, as well as kids in abusive homes or in dating violence with their partner that didn't have the monitoring that you would have if it was happening at school or in the community or at home, right? So the pandemic changed it. And then that goes right into the digital Lifeways. We're online together, and a lot of teens and youth live online because they're not going to school. I have 2 boys upstairs. They haven't been going to school for 2 years now. So their entire world has changed. So their social activities and dating activities are happening online more than anything else. So there's a lot of dangers with that, with adults. Man, so last year there was, you know what the dark web is, right? The black market, dark web. There is a manual that was created, and it's called something like How to Maximize Your Pedophilia During a Pandemic. The title, that's not verbatim, but it was something like that. And it was on the black web of how to use the internet to recruit, to groom, to make money, and to harm children. An actual online manual, if you can believe it. This is the world that we're living in. And how does that link to teen dating violence endangerment? It just all does. We know that their territory, youth territory, is now disconnected from adults and programs and services and advocacy and youth shelters because they have to be 6 feet apart. So shelters have had to minimize. The pandemic, I already went through that, and the digital piece, it's all connected. So that's how we have to work together and tell our stories to educate each other on how are we gonna work in this new world, and what do they need us to do instead of figuring it out for ourselves. Happy birthday, and also don't forget to send Mama flowers to honor her for the day. Ain't that right? And yeah, it's utterly disturbing, the things that are happening on the internet. So I'm gonna just take a breath Any other comments or thoughts on this, how it's connected and what I may have missed? Maybe have you all seen anything new or emerging since the pandemic on the internet when it comes to teen dating?
I think as all of us, our teens have been struggling in relationships, in school, academics, leads to stress when it comes to sports, because if you have kids that play sports, they want to be eligible. And then the pandemic has created this almost need to escape, which causes tension. I think parents, some of us, because of a lot of us grew up differently, right? Times were of a change since the 1980s, 70s, 60s, 50s, whenever you or before, those of you that were there have come. And with that change and with technology, our teenagers have a new space for friendship that we couldn't dream of. I mean, the internet came around when I was like maybe 14 or so. I mean, as far as like chat rooms and stuff. And even then I was young and new to it. It really was like 5 of us gathering around one computer being like, oh, look, a chat room. Now here we are umpteen years later, and there's more chat rooms than we could ever imagine. So like, how are our kids being pushed to have these digital friendships, and how closely do we know these people that they're connecting with online in different places? They can connect not only on their phone or iPad that they might be using for school, they also have gaming systems like PlayStations and Xboxes, which also all link up digitally and expand the world for them. I mean, they can meet anyone across the world. And I just think that's one, amazing, and two, very scary. You know, like on one hand, you want them to have those experiences of learning about the world. On the other hand, I want to keep them safe in my house. And so like, what are we doing to make sure that they're safe when they're connected to the internet and different online things?
Thank you. Are there any other shares or thoughts? You can put it in the chat too. That's cool. Yeah, awesome. Okay, thank you for that. Can we go to the next slide too? So we know how all of this is connected just for this topic or these 3 topics. So our first topic, apologies, I'm going to read in case folks happen to be on the phone. This session will showcase the unique concept of school as territory in connection to teen dating violence and all of its peer pressure, which we know exists, and youth as its own culture. So school as territory is just language, I'm air quoting now. As an undercurrent that is heavily disconnected from adults, especially online, unless you're fully monitoring your kids' online experience. Also disconnects advocates, teachers, and other mandated reporters. We talked about that, but it's really complex and comes in a lot of ways with social media, other digital spaces, and then that can lead to face-to-face relationships. So we want to talk about how are we operating as prosecutors, advocates, sane or safe nurses, executive directors, team leaders, youth-specific advocates or adult advocates that are working with whole families. We need to understand that when, and I don't mean to sound condescending because some of you just know all this already, but when a parent comes in for services and they have youth around them, we're doing our job, and we're approaching an adult or guardian to give them the support that they need. And then how do we do all things at one time? How are we all things in all ways to also be an advocate for the youth that comes in for that intake process for those shelter beds, right? So I urge you all to when you have your team meetings to talk about those layers. I know you're all working so hard in really difficult ways, but with Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, it's just our opportunity to be gratitude is medicine. Thank you for your work, and keep pushing that envelope, because kids, this one here fell through the cracks, and we don't want that anymore, right? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so today I hope we discuss how to support those youth individuals that are hour for hour with teens way more than they're with adults or even their guardians. And for us to, we're going to have a bit of a digital breakout, which is very cool. It's my first time doing it, but together we can identify ways to make connection to youth in their culture and create direct connections, which invariably is going to lead to youth leadership and giving them the autonomy that Ms. Vicky talked about earlier. We want to prevent those youth from slipping through the cracks. Or just by the way we're set up we're still adapting, and I'm really proud of our movement and the culturally specific ways the Black community are operating, the Latina community, the faith organizations and tribal communities, how we're all kind of taking back and doing a restoration of how we do our work, but there's so much work that needs to be done to break that down. Instead of the pan-Indian work, now we have to break it down to the youth culture within Native communities, right? So that's just something to think about because they're all barriers. And that's just, we got to keep it moving. Our grandmas did the work, our aunties did the work, we're doing the work. Now we're raising future leaders to do this work. Next slide, and any comments? I'm going to take a quick breath here. Any other thoughts?
Oh, I guess I was just going to say that I think back on my parents and them, like I mentioned before, the difference for them in coming up and what that looks like. And although they didn't do 100% everything they could have, their struggle is still meaningful, and they brought us to where I am now. So even the struggle is part of the journey, and being able to teach my kids, because if I hadn't gone through all that, they might not take me as seriously as they do. This woman told me that your ceiling is my floor when she talks to her kids. And I thought that is crazy, because like they get the suburban house and the nice clothes and stuff, but we had to struggle for that. And it's still a struggle. They just don't realize it. So I'm glad that they don't know. What they don't know yet won't hurt them, but we still have to prepare them for the real world and real relationships. And I look forward to doing that in a way that is both traditional in our values, but also modern, and making sure that their phones and technology are supporting their life and not just a tool that they use in a negative way. So just reminding them that there's so much information out there, and that generational and historical trauma and healthy teen relationships and good friendships, you can learn about all of that stuff on the internet if you choose to do something positive with it versus using it for something negative.
Ain't that the truth? So that makes me think of, I have storytelling and discussion, and everyone please chime in. And I maintain confidentiality, of course, but through the internet, and that each generation doing better, which is so true. Some youth have burner phones. They've been provided to by harm doers. Some youth have way more. My kids know more about technology than I know I'm ever going to learn in my lifetime. Like, they just can YouTube, podcast, game on Xbox, and be texting all at one time. And I'm like, how are you? Whatever. I don't have those multitasking skills. But with that, unfortunately, when there's a youth dating another youth, there's a lot of that peer pressure and bullying, where hiding and having a burner phone, or having the firewalls between the parent or the advocate or the adult, they know the technology to ride on that undercurrent. And a lot of harm doers mandate that, they force that. It's an act of violence to keep them isolated and do that harm without folks knowing about it. And it's just so heartbreaking, because it is also, I'm going to speak as a mom, that I don't have a PhD in technology, and I don't live in the same world in their culture that they live in. And I feel like I could study so much and still not even have a minimal grasp on their technology and how someone could be coercing them, harming them, threatening them, cyber stalking them, all of the things. And I love that thought you had, Amber, that there is great information. And even if we're just sharing that to the youth, or as advocates, we have a youth come in and we give them options of other things to look at and other tools in a world that they understand. Like there are resources for Xbox violence against youth. They exist. I haven't gotten there. I really should, but we can offer them to youth too. And then also uplifting those youth leaders, that tribal honor society of young advocates. Maybe they don't have perfect grades, but they follow the traditional values. They're in an altar. They're maybe dancers or basketballers or musicians, and they're following traditional values. So they are the honor society for this youth culture. They're the ones that are going to be the advocates and help be a safe listening ear for other youth. Next slide. Oh, Amber, did you have?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that that's so powerful and so true, because I see now as an advocate, as a former advocate, because now I'm doing tribal TA, but when I was an advocate, and because once you're an advocate, you're always an advocate, really. I was probably an advocate before I was an advocate. It's just that I didn't have a title of an advocate, but just being there for people, because that's what being an advocate really is listening and communicating and taking that lead. And I have seen that through who I am. I've seen it develop in my sons, and I'm so proud of them. I'm so grateful that they talk to their friends, and I push that on them. I'm like, you guys, don't just, when you see your friends having a hard time, especially in Indian country, right? We're all struggling. We all have the same issues, a lot of us going forward, addiction in our family and our parents, and their lives have been just as hurtful as the things that my kids know that I've been through. And I'm like, your friends, their parents, they used to be my friends. I'm like, and unfortunately, we've buried some of them. Some of them we don't see anymore because we've lost them to addiction. And we don't want that for you guys. And even though your friends are hurting and they're cyberbullying you, they're teasing you, they're disturbing your relationship. All these things have literally happened to my kids, including burner phones and police intervention, all kinds of crazy things with teenagers. And I'm just like, again, you guys, you have to be that one person uplifting your friend. You have to be that inner voice for your friend, because they don't have me. You know, they don't have the relationship I have with your dad, your stepdad. You know, not everyone can get along. Not everyone is going to give you their best advice. Not everyone wants to see you succeed, but your brothers want to see you succeed. I want to see you succeed. And you should want your friends to succeed. You should be uplifting our Native youth, because it means more coming from you than it will ever mean coming from me, as much as I try to get the message across. But the thing that makes it worth it is that I do see it happening. They're like, my friends always come to me for advice. And I'm like, that's because you're so smart. You're such a good leader. And I just try to bring out their really good qualities and keep teaching them from there. And when they're having those bad moments, remind them that we all make mistakes and none of us is perfect. And we're all in this journey together, trying to figure it out and do better. And their relationships are important. Hope that I don't want to overwhelm you.
No, that was awesome. Yes. I wish I would have had you in my life when I was a kid. Yes. It's so true. If you plant the seed of love and compassion, and I call them movement babies. I have 2 teenage boys too, and a few older, 2 older ones. And planting the seed in a movement baby of compassion, it's like growing little advocates, but it's a balance too, right? Because age appropriate education. Yeah. Thank you. That was awesome.
Thank you. You're doing a great job. I just want to help contribute to the conversation. If anyone else has anything to say, we'd love to hear from you guys. I know it's a hard topic, but as we move forward, we're just really sharing ideas about how we support our Native youth in different ways. And that's the main thing, is that we all walk away from this with some idea on how we can help someone we love that's struggling. And even if we don't love them as advocates, sometimes when they walk through the door, we fall in love. I'm just like, I just want to take you all home. That's why I couldn't be an advocate.
There's also a comment, Kiana, to all that continue to work harder than the people who continue to hurt our children and our future leaders. That's so true, Amber, is the comment. Yep, awesome words. There is a survivor advocate that does other work, and the storytelling is so powerful and awful, but she's on a healing journey, so I lift her as much as possible. But one of the things she said to me is people that are doing the harm are everywhere all the time. And even at 15, 14, 13 years old, those that are in cycles of violence that haven't had the privilege of having a loving someone in their life can continue that cycle. And there's so many behaviors in 2022 from the pandemic, from the unique scenario of sheltering in place and the lack of access. I'm appalled in 2022, the amount of harm doing online with peer pressure and bullying and character assassination and trafficking and these manuals. Like, it is a really hard time. So if we continue to have these conversations, and how many are on with us today? We got 58 folks. If 58 of us sit down with our kids and our parents and our aunties in our community, and we bring it up for an EP and we talk to our healers, it's just going to keep spreading like a constellation of stars that, you know, Creator gifted us. And if we keep pushing this information, it's going to reach, and it's so cliche, but they say, if you can change one life, right? But if we keep having these conversations, we can change many more than that. It's a lot, but thank you for all your words and all the hard work you're doing. I also want to share, it says tribal school, and it is a memory and a remembrance, and I've been activated. I'm sitting in Pennsylvania right now, in the northern Appalachian Mountains, and I sit 15-minute drive from the Carlisle Indian School. Very, very first school that ever opened, in boarding schools that started it all. And so this East Coast, 10 years ago, had from Canada to Georgia, or no, Florida, the whole eastern seaboard had maybe 6 federally recognized tribes. 6. Now, because people are evolving, and we know the red tape of the tribal sovereignty application process, that every time there's a new president, it starts at the bottom again. Anyway, Carlisle is here. So we have a very unique first colonization storyline. And although these individuals are adults now, they went through a lot of identity crisis over the generations since Carlisle closed in 1918. And I was working here in this region, and there was a coworker who worked at a different program, but we had a comprehensive domestic violence shelter, racial justice, economic justice. We work with veterans, very comprehensive, one-stop shop for services. And she had called me under the stairs, like a big secret. She said, Rebecca, can you come talk to me? And we went and scuttled under the chairs. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's she gonna say to me, man? And she told me that her grandmother, and I was given the gift of sharing this story, just letting y'all know. Her grandmother was in Harrisburg and was on her deathbed in the hospital. And she started singing a language that no one in the family surrounding her knew what language she was singing. And as it turned out, her aunt told her that her mother went to the Carlisle school. And when the school closed, she was just let go into the world here on the East Coast. And she was so afraid to tell anyone or any of her children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren or anyone else in the family for fear for her whole long life that there was going to be another taking away of the children, right? So that's that historical trauma. That's, you know, that's new language too, historical trauma, that we keep telling the youth these stories of where they come from so they understand that, you know, the world is constantly changing, but we will always carry that and we'll always want to protect our children, especially in 2022 with all the racial crimes that are happening and the hate crimes. It is a part of their life. So that's another piece with peer pressure and educating our children, and in our work as advocates, that we do carry the history along with our future as a hybrid love story, right? That was a tangent. I'm going to take a breath and maybe go to the next slide unless someone wants to offer anything else.
I just want to say you're doing great. You always remind me of something, and we're just kind of going back and forth here, but in thinking about my grandmother, and I share this a lot when I present because it's one of the most impactful moments of my life, was that she told me as I grew up in an abusive home and her son was my abuser, that I didn't have to love the things that he did, but I could just love my dad for being my dad. And that statement has carried with me probably since I was about 5 years old. And those of you that are continuing to heal, reminding yourself that it's okay to love the people that we love in our families. We don't have to always support their decisions, but also our kids. They don't always have to love us, but love our decisions, I mean, but they can always love us, and that we're doing the best that we can from a broken circle that we are trying very hard to restore. So just allowing that patience and understanding coming from them, because I don't think enough people have those conversations with their kids. Sometimes we misspeak because that's the way we were brought up. So, I mean, we don't want to be like, oh my God, why are you so stupid? You know, like that shouldn't come out of my mouth, but it has. And I heard you speak earlier when you were talking about, you made that promise with your 5-year-old self. And I think back to my 5-year-old self thinking the same thing. I'll never do this to my kids. You know, I would never, how can they possibly be doing this to me right now? Like, this is not normal. But I know that it helped me be a better mother and helped me carry on a different message to my children because of those resilient people I had in my family. My grandmother, like you mentioned in the story just a moment ago, the grandmother in your story, her being released and let go, it was similar for my grandmother at 18, except for she went on to get a degree. She was the first Native American woman to get her degree in Aberdeen, South Dakota. Not ever, but just in Aberdeen, South Dakota, the first woman, Native American woman to go to college there at that school at the time. And her struggle is both like an honor for me to share. She's no longer here, but it just reminds me of how powerful she was in my life. And even though I know she didn't do the very best she could with her children, she learned from her mistakes and she brought it forward to my life. And I'm so grateful for that. And all of you that are here on the call that are advocates, that pushed yourself because you had a grandmother or an auntie, or you changed for your children, or you changed so you could help that woman or girl that wasn't there to help you. I appreciate you. And I'm sure Rebecca, and for First Nations women all around, we all support you and love you. And we're grateful you're here on the call with us today. So thank you guys again. It's so much fun. Good conversation.
Wopila, so much for that. I have a mentor that helped me through my darkest times, because this movement can be so darn violent. Just the movement, just us sometimes can be violent to each other, because many of us are hurting and healing. But she taught the words, healing people can heal people, and hurting people can hurt people. And I know that's out there a lot more, but back in the day when I first met her, though, that was new to me, and it made a lot of sense. And staying on a healing journey when our movement can be violent, and funding can be violent, and competitiveness can be violent, lateral oppression, all the things. I second what you said, Amber. standing up against wrong and continuing the work when the work can be hurtful is really brave. Thank you so much for that. Can I have next slide, please? I'm trying to be conscious of time because we're still on topic 1. So this is another opportunity. This is a little new and exciting. Hopefully you can all take it back to your programs too. We have technology now to talk about question via idea board. So I'm going to pass this to Brittany to tell you a little bit about that. Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the chat, and as long as you join this link, it should bring up the screen for the idea boards, which I'm going to share. And so this is a completely anonymous system. So when you see the question and you hit the plus sign, it pops up with a sticky note, and then you type your response. Nobody will know that it was you that responded, but we will kind of debrief as a group.
Thank you so much. I'm going to have to let my dogs in while we're doing this. So I'm going to step away for a minute, but the question is, what are some of the ways to reach youth in your local school, teams, youth activities, or cultural activities, and what works for your region? If you could click that plus in that link and add your thoughts, that would be awesome. So far, we have sing traditional songs, school-based programming. What are some of the ways that you're reaching youth? Social media, ding, ding, ding. Burn some sage and smudge. Have teen events. That's a huge one. Working through peers. Yeah, uplifting the youth leadership. That's brilliant. Social gatherings or social media gatherings. Yep. What works best for one of the regions on our call today? A teen night. Yeah, creating spaces that are for them. Community advisor. Oh, you can't see me right now, but I'm snapping and clapping and hooraying. Community advisory boards that include youth. Having junior boards, youth advisory. If it's for your powwow, bring them in. If it's for your domestic violence prevention night, bring them in and have a board that can reach out to other youth and they're leading their own work. It's brilliant. Thank you for that. And we are in a pandemic, so Zoom teen talking circles is really smart too. There's many of them. To keep them growing is awesome. Community response teams focusing on youth. Cultural activities, yep. Oh, I see multiple youth advisory councils. That's awesome. And yeah, real simple. Being present for them, right? Sometimes you just need to be available. Health clinic has a culture. Our health clinic here has a culture prevention class. Unfortunately, the surrounding tribes don't allow intertribal or non-tribal members. That is unfortunate because we also know the big debate, and we don't have to go down the road, but there is a big debate of enrollment versus descendant versus who deserves to be a part of community activities, right? So that is unfortunate. That's something to maybe talk about in your program. How are you serving your community members and the youth that maybe don't have the blood quantum for that particular tribe? It's a thing. Creating youth councils, yep. Youth-led work, outreach PowerPoints on healthy relationships, yeah, and handouts and flyers and Twitter storms. I know Twitter is a little bit out of style now, but back in the day, there were Twitter storms where youth would, because that, you go where the youth are. Now, I don't even think it's Instagram anymore. I don't think it's even Snapchat as much as it used to be. Herbal medicines, identifying and how to use them. Yep, keep cultural traditions alive in that healing work. Youth incentives, huge. Whoever typed that in, thank you. Yep, Target, Starbucks, movie theaters, sometimes just a gift card or $20 for focus groups or for joining the event for the day. Teaching traditional songs, yes. Naming ceremonies. Naming ceremonies done by community elder programs, connecting with children and youth programs. And I'm again snapping in the background here because that is decolonizing our work. Thank you for that comment. We do need to decolonize our work along the way, so that's great. Encouraging Native language in all aspects of the work, yes. TikTok sermons, snapping, there it is. That's the one that's, yeah. Identifying clanship, yes. Oh, I see another one, and I'm going to stop rambling to be conscious of time, but this one, our men's program would invite young ones in to teach them to make rattles, drums, and other traditional items. That's brilliant. Yeah, thank you. So keep them coming as you'd like. This is all wonderful information. Hopefully folks are taking away new ideas because that's the intention. And with that, could we go to the next slide? I also want to read a comment. Let me turn my camera back on. So true to remember to love those that did the best they could. It's a struggle in that journey to love those that have hurt me. Activated here. Thank you for sharing. Her mentor said to me, when we heal ourselves, we heal ourselves. And that has changed my life and the way I look at those that hurt me. Healing is so hard, especially if the violence continues on through bad behaviors, even if you're no longer a youth. We still have little children inside. So we have to heal this adult person and the youth inside of us, right? And that's just real talk. And then another comment, I came for the youth and I'm finding so much healing in this so far. So much multi-generational trauma and identity issues in my family because it was injected. But I decided as a child to heal us, and I'm grateful to have been able to heal so much in your bloodline. Thank you for that. Awesome comments. Oh, can we have the next slide, please? And then topic 2. So we have 30 minutes yet before our break, which is totally cool because we've talked a lot about the pandemic. And I really would love to have you all share audio, video, chat, what you're seeing with the pandemic. The reality is in the city, it looks different. In rural communities like here, I'm in the mountains of Pennsylvania, it looks so different. On the res, it looks even more different, and so on and so forth, right? So the pandemic, we know shelter in place has impacted schools. My kid had to quit his job, so I know that's a big impact. And then if we think about not only the teen dating as a bubble, but there's all of the other pieces to that pie, like not having your job anymore, not seeing friends, not having a graduation from high school, all of these mental health impacts of the lives that should be, you know, also exciting. We're talking about teen dating, so it has all of these heavy topics, but also the joy of youth, having a graduation, going to basketball games, going to the skate park down in, you know, in Pine Ridge. There's a huge skate park that's a lot of fun, but with the pandemic, all of that has been shut down. So how do we find the balance of mental health, healthy families, services that you're providing, but then also monitoring that teen dating? So are there any? Yes, Gloria, thank you so much for the message. We'll make sure you get the recording and it'll be available in Redwin. So thank you for joining us as long as you could. So what other things are impacted or exacerbated by the pandemic with youth, with our families and youth culture? So we can share a little bit more of what, if you're in Florida, if you're Seminole, if you're in Alaska, if we share across our communities, we'll just learn more today. I'll give a minute and then jump back on.
Well, I guess I will take the lead on this question.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you.
As a mom with, I not only have 4 boys, I should mention I have 3 bonus sons that are my fiancés. And so I have plenty of teenagers to choose from. So when I talk about all 8 of the boys, I feel like it's pretty random. You won't know which one it is, but they have had some crazy times during the pandemic, including related to teen dating and violence. Unfortunately, life is not always, like as much as you want to be a good advocate and a good person and raise your kids well, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have moments. So I just want to throw that out there, because before I tell the story, there's moments. And one of those moments was recently, my son got into a fight at school, and the fight, just like, this was this school year, because he almost got kicked out of school. So I'd say like before Christmas though. So like maybe November. He got into a fight with a young boy at school, and this young boy was sending inappropriate pictures to, they're both 10th graders, and he was sending pictures to maybe 6th and 7th grade girls. Now their high school, elementary school is all in one building, because they're actually on the reservation going to school. So it's a little bit different than maybe some cities would be. So their elementary, high school is all in one building. And the young girls had went to the principal, and they had also reported this incident to several teachers, and nothing happened. And then my son, being my son, him and his friend, because it's the res, so like everybody's related, everybody knows everybody, this is a small town. So they ended up talking to this boy because, well, they know him, they're all on the basketball team together, they're all friends, and they were like, hey, knock it off, like, don't be sending pictures to so-and-so, because my son and his best friend were talking to this kid, because the best friend, one of the kids was his sister. So he was like, if you do this again, blah, blah, XYZ is going to happen. Well, then next thing you know, it escalated from there. This boy and his girlfriend started harassing my son via text messages, and we're just putting him down. All this stuff happened. So my son and him ended up, and really my son attacked him in school. So they got into a pretty bad fight, which only lasted 10 seconds. It wasn't like, the kid wasn't bleeding. He didn't have any black eyes. He wasn't severely hurt. Thank goodness, because of course I work for a non-violent society personally, and my son wasn't raised to fight. So it was pretty extreme circumstances. But I guess I'm sharing the story because how all of this revolves around 2 boys fighting over girls. Sexual assault was involved, sexual harassment was involved. The principal and the staff there actually wanted to suspend my son over all of this. And I'm like, he came to you, and he didn't tell me, but these girls came to you on multiple levels, and nothing happened because this boy is a basketball player. Like, so because he plays ball, they didn't want to suspend him because the team would be short. And it's just crazy nonsense. And I'm like, this wouldn't have happened if you guys had taken preventative steps in the first place to drop the situation. And so I guess what I'm getting back to again is, one, I had to have a serious conversation with my son about how this could have been handled in different ways, including coming to me, because I would have talked to the school. I would have been an advocate for him and for these girls if I had known what was going on. But because of technology, he just decided to handle it himself. And I think that technology also plays a part in our kids' response, right? Because nowadays everything's instantaneous. If you want to buy something, you can get it instantly. If you want to order something online, you can get it instantly. And like, being seriously, if you want to order drugs, you can pretty much get them instantly. So like, our kids are growing up in a really scary world. And also that thought process of being instantaneous. He had a problem and he just wanted to go ahead and do what he felt. And I'm just over here like, you also have to learn to control your emotions and your feelings and live in a way that Creator sees you, which is, we are all connected. And what this boy did is not normal. The pictures and things that he was doing is inappropriate and it isn't right, but that doesn't mean we seek out justice for ourselves. We have a process that we need to follow. And on one hand, I'm proud of you because you understand what justice is and that what this kid was doing is inappropriate. On the other hand, I'm disappointed in your actions because there are other ways that we have to think about handling situations in the future when it comes to letting our emotions be the driving force behind our behavior, because sometimes we're going to come across hurt people and they are not in healing mode, and we don't know what their journey has been like. We don't know where they're at and what they're trying to prove and who they are, but we know that they're hurt. So how can we help not just only these girls that have been hurt, but also this young boy? And I had to have this conversation with multiple people. I had to have the conversation with the principal, with the administrators, because of course, my son was suspended and I didn't say anything about him being suspended. And then they add an extension on to his suspension because he did it willfully. They didn't just get into a fight. He attacked this kid. So then they suspended him for 5 more days and then they wanted to expel him. And when they were going to expel him, that's when I stepped in and I was like, hey, we're going a little bit above and beyond, being that, this was a less than a 5-second fight. Neither kid was hurt. The other kid actually apologized because he knew what he was doing was wrong. It's just that all of this led to more wrong. None of it was right. And again, how are we getting either one of these boys help? Is it going to help that my son's going to be expelled from school? And he is, he's in a Rikara. Well, that's just one of the tribes that he is. But if you know anything about the Rikara people, they're a small tribe that's left in North Dakota. They're actually part of a band of 3 tribes that were pushed together. So the MHA Nation is actually 3 tribes, the Mandan, Hidatsa, and the Rikara. And where they live in White Shields is where the Rikara people live. And there's just a small population of them, probably around 1,000. And I'm like, so we're going to, and then this other boy too, he's also a relative of ours on my dad's side. I'm like, we are not helping either one of our relatives by kicking or expelling either of these kids. The young man that's sending inappropriate pictures, obviously something's going on with him and he needs counseling. Like, where is the counselor in this situation? And how can we make them a part of this conversation, and also get him a referral to go and speak with someone more than a school counselor, because there's some stuff going on here. And then also, like, my son on his side of things, getting some anger management and also some more time with me, really, because he spends a lot of his time with his dad and just like different things. And I'm like, but also, he needs his own counseling and he needs to work through what he's got going on, because he's a middle child. So I know that anger just came from a place of like having an older brother and a younger brother that they occasionally argue and fight. This is not the same. You have to have respect for other people outside and your brothers, of course. I'm always telling the boys no fighting, but as teenage boys have done for hundreds of years, they are going to argue and they are going to fight. And it is up to us to get them to learn how to control themselves and be appropriate members of society. And I don't want it coming out in his future relationships. And I remind him of that. Someday you might be a father and you might have a child to care for. And even if you're not a father, if you have nieces and nephews, if he has a new little brother, I'm like, you have a new baby in your family. So there are lots of ways that you have to learn how to practice patience and how to be kind, because you don't want to explode on someone that's innocent at the wrong time. So knowing when and how to use your voice is the most powerful gift I can give you. So anyways, I don't want to ramble too long. I know we're short on time. If anyone else has anything to add.
Thank you. That was awesome. And I had another activation, which is, instead of cycles of violence, we can have cycles of healing. Right. And I think that storyline or storytelling was really helpful, because the end of the day, youth today are doing and operating in the same world, being a youth, whether it's 1982 or 2022. Yet they have all the social, digital stuff, and in the middle of a pandemic with all of the limitations and frustrations. And there is a mental health crisis. across all of our nations, including the white community, the Black community, Latina, Middle Eastern, everyone, Asian Pacific Islander, and tribal communities. So when we think about just how difficult it can be to be a teenager today, we have all of these additional layers that just make it more difficult, right? And the pandemic has just multiplied that. We have a family relative that needed a bed because they were suicidal, and there were no beds for states surrounding my state. Like, that's how intense the mental health crisis is, especially in connection to suicide. So I appreciate that storytelling. That's admirable that he stood up against wrong, right? But to have the elimination of the social media, those texts, those photos, the pandemic, and all of the mental health triggers, like, these kids are warriors to just keep on keeping on during these times. I do want to read some questions. I'm sorry if I'm talking so fast. I'm an East Coast girl. So we have a comment. The justice orientation is hard to manage, in my opinion. I work hard with my youngest to honor her higher sense of justice while teaching her to control the impulse for immediate action, which is online life. It is immediate. This is where I hold other adults super accountable. We have the responsibility to create an appropriate container for kids to grow within. We can't ignore things when kids reach out. That infuriates me, and I'm kind of loud about it in my community. Thank you for that. Another comment, family sharing for iPhone works wonders. You can control a lot of what they're doing on their phones, how much time they spend on their phone, and blocking inappropriate content. Thank you. Please keep those tips coming in to the chat. That's awesome. And then technology allows teens to create their own new social boundaries that have changed a lot, especially during the pandemic. These boundaries blur a lot more, I've found, as a mom of a teenage girl. That's more difficult to understand with the screens between normal socialization and online interactions. And they've had to reach out to stay connected. True. These kids are all desperate to stay connected to one another, and these new boundaries make it so difficult to monitor. That's very true. I'm going to put it in the chat while we are on break. There's Cyber Safety Cop. He is not native, but he works. He's an ex-cop, he's ex-military, and now his entire career and organization is dedicated to helping parents and teachers know all of the tools for online monitoring during the pandemic. Especially, his work has multiplied. So while we're on a break, I'm going to add that in. We can't have enough resources. There's a lot to monitor online these days. And then another comment, yes, Amber, at counselors, school counselors that I have experienced don't take to teen issues. A family friend is a teen who wants to leave home, and I suggested to the teen to talk to the school counselor, which I heard the school counselor responded, just stay home until you graduate, which is another 2 years. That's a good response. No. No intervention was offered whatsoever. I'm working on trying to figure out what to do to help this teen. Running away is an option they are considering. What do I do? Any recommendations from the group?
I would say just stay as connected as possible. Continue to empower them to stay, make a pros and cons list. I know it seems pretty simple, but in my experience, the youth that I work with who run away all the time, they've already had their mind made up. So create a safety plan and make sure that they know exactly what it is that they need to do in the event of an emergency. That's more of a harm reduction approach, but should you find yourself in that situation where they run, at least they will have some ideas of what to do, right? I'm in an urban area, and I have intertribal youth where their tribes are out of state. And we're seeing a lot of an uptick of domestic violence in the relationships, lots of teen pregnancy, and a lot of opiate addiction and fentanyl poisoning. What we're not seeing is harm reduction strategies coming from the county for these youth. Some of the positives are that there are online beating circles. It's helping with coping skills and depression. The kids who are at home with their families, they're starting to get involved in policy work, which is actually really amazing. They're trying to, rename some of the historical sites right now. So there's definitely a lot of good. The bad seems to outweigh more of what I'm seeing, but we're just all doing the best we can.
Thank you. We have a comment, supporting comments in the chat here. If you're not seeing them, have you connected with the adults in the teen's life yet? Maybe the adults could be good with some kind of other housing option or idea. Where I come from, teens leave home and live with friends' families. Yep, all the time. Sometimes no one cares because they know where the kid is. And then to just add on to Amber's awesome comment too, like staying with the youth, like she had recommended, to identify, is it substance abuse? Is it domestic violence? Is it sex trafficking? Finding out the specifics when they're willing to share and ensure confidentiality too, right? So you can connect them to the right folks or youth leaders that are working, because there's a lot of schools. In Rapid, there's a Lakota Youth Project where some of the youth have individual, what's the word? One will focus on, I was homeless. One will focus on substance abuse in my family. So there's this peer-to-peer youth mentorship opportunity. And it's not everywhere, but it might be available around, if that makes sense.
I just want it makes sense to me. And I just wanted to add that also getting into Job Corps could be an option. They're located different locations across the country. Some also getting your GED. I was in 9th grade when I dropped out of high school, and a lot of people might think that's crazy, but if you are already homeless and you're being bullied and different things are going on, sometimes getting out of that environment is the best thing that you can do. And I've had one of my sons got his GED so far out of the 8 boys, and he was much happier getting out of the school system that he was in and just getting to work. That's him and that's his choice. And I supported him. And I don't think we often make it a big enough deal of that accomplishment. Like getting your GED is something to be proud of. And it doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean that you're less than. It's just a way of getting to that next. It's just a way of moving forward. You continue from there. I went to college when I was in my 20s and again in my 30s. So, it just depends on the person and the individual and their goals and their dreams, and creating that safety plan with them. And a safety plan doesn't just have to be about the immediate safety of if this happens at your house, this is where your keys are going to be, or you're going to pack an overnight bag, or you can leave this overnight bag at my house, which might be an option for the one lady that left the comment. She has a teen she's trying to help. Maybe part of the safety plan would be that they leave a bag at your house so that they know that if they have to run on short notice, they have a place to go. But also having those dream boards, having those letting them cut out magazines and create pictures and do a little bit of some information we could provide on a vision board, breaking it into different sections, creating a section for what they see themselves doing as far as education, as far as their spiritual goals are, what they see themselves doing, because when they buy into that, they're more likely to do it versus us just coming up with the plan. This is what I think you should do. This is what I want you to do. It's more about these are some options, Job Corps is out there. Maybe you could get your GED, there's some shelters available. You could always stay here with me, but also, what do you want to do? What sounds good to you? And maybe we could just write some of these things down. What are the top 3 that kind of yeah, I want to do that kind of came to you? Because they'll participate once they get that level of trust and comfort with you. And we can't always follow through with everything, because family emergencies and different things come up, but that's also being clear on your boundaries and what you can provide for them right from the beginning. Kind of, like, I'm a busy mom and I have other things going on, but I'm always here to listen to you. I'll always call you back. I'll always return your calls. I'll always meet you when I can. My door is always open for you. I got some sage in here you need to smudge. Just being there, that's part of it.
There's comments of like people snap in. Thank you. Exactly. Meeting them where they're at. That's huge. All that you just said fits right into there too. And yes, alternatives exist because there are many ways to live a life that feels good. Another comment, such good ideas. And wow, that's awesome. I love those ideas. And then we have a few minutes left before we take a break. And I want everyone to get water and stretch and take care of yourselves. But before we do that, I want to just bring it to a different level as advocates and as aunties and community leaders, whoever you are in your community working with these teens in the future or now, that it's also, especially during this pandemic, important to have a safety plan for yourself, whether you're a community leader, a tribal leader, an advocate, whatever work you're doing in conjunction and reaching out to teens and supporting them. We are living in a very dangerous time where tempers are high, mental health is at a low, substance abuse is at an all-time high as well. And many of our programs are just stretched thin because of the pandemic and however it is impacted. So small storytelling, there was a youth who survived incredible odds and had escaped. And the shelter was not prepared to handle the need for security for the executive director, for the administrative assistants, for the actual advocates, for the people that provided the transportation to and from medical appointments or to visit their children. And that's just something to remember while we're talking about working with teens, especially if there are organized crime connected, which just happens with teens, unfortunately, now more than ever, that you have to have a safety protocol, not only in building it for an adult or a youth, but also for yourselves as a program. How will you handle if someone is always sitting outside your program, if it's a shelter or a tribal coalition or a program? They know you're working with a youth or an adult. Those safety protocols are essential, especially if they can find your name online on your website. So I just wanted to mention that as well, because it is a thing, unfortunately. And then online stalking, right? We have to remember that with the pandemic. Online is a recruitment center and a way to screenshot and do harm, peer-to-peer bullying that can happen. And the reverse, which is really awful and weird, but people that do harm are really creative on how they can do harm. If there is something going on at the school with an investigation, like suspensions or expulsions, we know with casual cruelty and online hate crimes, there are apps. If there is a harm doer who is in a teen domestic violence relationship and they want to exude their power and control over their partner, there are apps where you can download the app and create fake screenshots that look like receipts. Like, this is the language my teens use. If someone is caught saying something bad or being threatening, there are fake apps to fake a response by someone to be able to send it to the school administration as an act of bullying or threats. It's also been attempted to be used in the courts, which is really sad, but it's just good to know if you're working with teens that fake receipts exist. Take a breath. Any other comments from anyone? Or we can go to the next slide, maybe. Okay, well, we are actually 4 minutes early, but I just want to give a time for others to chime in. I haven't even looked at our list of who's with us. Awesome. I see some familiar names. So this work is hard, right? We're parents, we're relatives, we're guardians, we're advocates. Many of us are survivors. At the end of the day, we have to remember where we have been so we stay not relevant, stay connected to the journey that we've lived and really understand this youth culture that they're in, that times are changed and our advocacy has to change with it. We can't have the same policies and procedures that we had written down 4 years ago. They need to be adapted to these times and how our work is changing, which is heavy before we take a break. But I just wanted to say we're back in 33 minutes from now, and enjoy your break time. Please come back so we can talk some more. Great, so just a heads up, could we do next slide? Thank you so much. So before we go back into topic 2, I just wanted to let you all know in the chat, I had said I was going to send you some resources. So this one is mainstream. He is a white heterosexual male, but he's been in law enforcement, the military. He's an investigator. He has directly intervened on youth, runaway homeless youth, and all of the endangerment that comes around youth and families. So his name is Clayton Cranford, and he does cybersafetycop.com. And he does one-pager fact sheets on TikTok. He talks about Instagram, what's happening with some of the really awful challenges, like the paprika challenge, which has gone way darker and deeper. Like there was I don't even want to say it, man, but honesty is truth, right? And we're just keeping it real. There was a youth, possibly, we don't know for sure, initiated punch someone day or sexually assault someone day that folks were supposed to record the incident and post it for views. And I think some of them are just trolls doing really bad things, but it's a part of this online culture. So online website, cybersafetycop.com, has a lot of resources that go across our cultures because it's about online cyber safety. And then Love is Respect always gets a shout out. They have a website with a lot of mainstream tools that also could be good resources for your tribal communities, whether it's reservation, urban or rural. I'm getting tongue-tied. And then we're also going to continue talking about the pandemic and this online teen dating environment. On February 16th, we hope you also register for that event. We'll be together again, and we'll go even deeper into teen dating violence with some other topics like consent and just other intersections that are relevant that we're hearing from the grassroots, from teens, from families, and from you all that are doing direct service or national TA and training. Also, when we're wrapped up, really appreciate when you all chime in with your thoughts and your stories and what you're seeing in your community. So when we release our toolkit, it does include your voice. When you take the time, which is so appreciated, to chime into that chat or contribute to the conversation, it's just a wider net for supporting other advocates that may have the exact same scenario that you're seeing or going through. So please continue to chime in. We did lose a few people during the break, to be expected. This is an online virtual training. If you do have to disconnect, which we hope you don't, there will be a recording later. So yeah, I'm gonna take another breath. I have my water here. I hope you all got your mini. Your sacred water. Water is life, right? It's very healing. So we're still on topic 2, and we're just gonna dive right in. We also want to discuss the big changes and the small changes that we're seeing because of this pandemic in the urban environment, the rural, reservation, and also suburban. with the intersection of the digital piece, you know, youth are everywhere at the same time, and it really doesn't matter where you are in your geography. There is a youth culture that's, you know, second or third to being Black or Asian Pacific Islander, Native, Middle Eastern, or any of the faith communities. A lot of this does intersect because some teen dating is only happening online because of the pandemic. Like, how do we continue to eliminate the confusion in all of this while we're serving a community that's constantly evolving because technology is evolving? Can we have the next slide too? Thank you. So we did talk about this a lot. It's so interwoven. We could be talking about substance abuse and we would intersect with pandemic. Mental health, you know, we've been down a wide road in this conversation, but I wanna ask you all in the chat or to unmute or on video, whatever, some of the tips that you have in working around the pandemic in your programs. Some of our grantees or partners in the technical assistance world, we know a lot of programs have had to just shut down because someone had COVID in the office. And then there's these unique realities that people are working with their personal cell phones because the program is closed. And what does that mean to you? How are you operating? So what, if you could in the chat, add some of the effects of the pandemic in your work, whether it's specific to teens or adults, and how have you adapted? So again, how are you operating differently due to the pandemic? I'll give you an example from work with hybrid love stories and some of my other hats I wear. We've had to increase our collaborative connections and working closer. Don't you bark, Mothershka. Please don't bark. Making bigger networks because capacity is limited. Youth services can also be limited. So we're building relationships farther and deeper than we've done before. And that is a really big benefit because we can't be all things to all scenarios all the time. So if we can't be an expert in legal advocacy or mandated reporting or substance abuse or the lack of shelter space in youth shelters, it's great to have a network that can work together to problem solve. And sometimes that means having a donation spree to just have some dollars in your program pocket so you can buy a bus ticket or a hotel room or provide food, just one meal for a runaway youth that's using your program services when you don't have actual funding or federal funding for that. So that's just another opportunity. Some of the other options, and please chime in. I know it's been a long day in listening mode. So I'm just going to keep telling you some things we've heard or experienced ourselves. There was a TA opportunity working directly with a school, and it was done virtually. Kids weren't in school at the time. So we had been invited to talk to youth leaders and talk about anti-violence and teen dating in their world. And these youth leaders learned and they educated us. That led to what is 360-degree mentoring, where we learn from each other and they inform the work that we're doing. Another example of that work, so we know there's still boarding schools. Are they the same as the Indian industrial or mission schools back in the day that some of our relatives were in? They're different, but they're modern. And there are many boarding schools that still exist. They just look different. But in doing, not field work, that sounds so bougie, I don't know. We were visiting at a school and the youth were making unidentifiable disclosures. They were just talking in general about what's happening in the student body at a boarding school. And one of the house moms, because a boarding school students live in, and they have house moms and house parents, or, you know, elders that are working, that are supervising the dorms. And after about an hour of youth talking about what they need and what they're going through and how difficult it can be having teen dating violence or domestic violence, one of the house parents stood up and said, you know, I'm a house parent, but I wasn't trained for this. And youth come to me and sometimes completely distraught and going through it and in tears, and sometimes in the worst cases are suicidal, and they're going to the adult that's closest to them. But a house mom or a parent is monitoring the safety of the dorm, making sure people go to sleep on time, wake up on time, that they resolve any disputes happening in the dorm, but they're not yet trained for domestic violence. So that's something you can look into locally if you have the capacity, or make a connection. Again, making connections. If your program doesn't have the capacity to work with a local school or a boarding school, you can make connections to Red Wind. If it's substance abuse, if it's any of the other intersections of teen dating, there are many service providers that can become your partner. Because again, we can't do all things for all people all the time. So that's just an idea to make a connection with your local school and do some intervention and prevention work, and make yourself available. If you're not going to be able to do the work individually, you can make the connection to the folks that can do the work. Then the youth in the community have a whole organized constellation of people doing work together. So that's just an idea. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay. Yeah. So if I could pass it to Brittany again, I'm going to hold on some of my other notes so I don't ramble on. Brittany, could you go ahead and do the idea board again?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to go ahead and post the idea board in the chat and then share the screen.
So here we're going to talk about, since the pandemic has started, youth have had new ways to go to school, be in their relationships, and find safety. How have you addressed these changes in your community or in your work? What are some creative angles you've done it? Just go ahead and type it in with a green plus sign, please. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I lost my Zoom. I just had a mini panic attack. Okay, sorry for being so quiet. Thanks for those that have added to the idea board. So since the pandemic, let me move this over. Whew, I can't believe I got it back. Thank goodness. So since the pandemic, youth have new ways of going to school, to being in relationships, or finding safety. How have you addressed these changes? Made posters. We also have creating virtual spaces for connection, adding internet at home, held virtual contests, more online monitoring apps and programs. That's awesome. Offering prizes for attending, taking a break from the virtual world. And if you can, it's easier in the warmer months, but to be outside. Or if you're used to the outside, you can do pony rides, you can do other outside excursions, especially cultural teachings, which can be really awesome for conversation and safety. Another comment, we do weekly check-ins with youth groups and letting the kids express the impact of the pandemic that it's had on their lives. Another one, made myself more aware by engaging in media that I'm not so comfortable or confident with. When I am with my youth, I listen to their music and reflect with them on their playlists changing. Wow, that's pretty good. Adding a classroom in the shelter, that's good. Collaborate with other departments, community resources, schools, etc. This is awesome. Thank you for this comment. Talking to my friends, discussing concerns, and being real. If we don't talk about it, we're adding to the harm by letting things stay hidden. Keeping a safe space. Our women's program offers Zoom teen girls talking circles. That's awesome. Finding or creating learning spaces at home. Another comment, I will be presenting to teens virtually next week about healthy relationships. There's that direct service connection and creating leaders. That's awesome. Tribes making internet more accessible. That's huge, yes. Helping families get internet for free. The men's program has Zoom and in-person talking circles. And this is a good one, walking outside alone and with the youth, social distance style to keep the conversations going. Thank you so much, Wobila, for those additions. You can feel free to keep typing in. We will have them recorded so they can inform our future work. But for now, could we go back to the PowerPoint? And then next slide, please. So thank you so much for that conversation. We want to keep the conversation going too. And I have some notes. Some of them are voices from the movement. Some of them are from teens or advocates. So please chime in as you can. So for the third topic, we're back to the digital space, which we can go deeper into. Again, I did post some resources, Cyber Safety Cop, easy printouts to bring into a talking circle and discuss. But even before the pandemic, we know that digital bullying and cyber stalking is awful. And January was Human Trafficking Awareness Month and Stalking Prevention Month. Cyber stalking is an epidemic that we may have experienced, whether it's, domestic violence or sexual violence, or just disagreeing over politics or vaccinations. We know that the internet can be a very dangerous place and you need to be thick-skinned to stay present in those spaces. An example of that are things like Runaway Packs, where adults pretend to be teenagers during the pandemic, just inboxing 100, 200, 400 youth of any gender and or identity, and just seeing how many conversations that they can begin pretending to be another youth, so they can lure them away for a number of different reasons. Also, we know catfishing exists. A lot of people do catfishing and have 20 relationships going at once for their entertainment, which is really sadistic and awful, but that can lead to trying to gain money, power, control, or just be abusive trolls. And it's an odd reality that some people think that that's entertainment, to link up with a 13-year-old, whether they intend to meet them face-to-face or not. With youth that do know each other and they're in the same community, we know revenge porn is a reality that, and if folks don't know what that is, two individuals will be dating, have an intimate, emotional, intellectual, or physical relationship, and they break up. And the modern digital life is, rally your posse and gain as many followers as you can to then harm someone you wish to have harmed. And that can be done on a mass scale, especially in the world of influencers. If someone is really popular at school, maybe they have 100 followers, which is a really big deal to them in their age group. Or maybe they're a gamer, they're on YouTube or TikTok, and they have 2 million followers. So what that can result is someone wants to do you harm. They don't need to touch you. They don't need to be in your home, your community. They can do it from afar and have potentially 2 million people just sending you hate comments. And some of them get really ugly. You should kill yourself. I hope you are raped. You are a liar and you should die. Like, some of them get really awful. And unfortunately, I don't know, I apologize. I'm gonna smudge while I tell this story. And it's probably not new to many of you, but there was a young self-identified girl, teenager, who was being really bullied by girls because of a boy and a breakup. And some youth relationships last a very short time, but everyone gets involved in the school. Okay. And this young teenager was bullied so bad, only online, that she hung herself live on social media. And I believe it was a Facebook Live video. She set her camera up and her mom was yelling for her in the background, "I don't know where you are." And she hung herself live on Facebook. So that was a really big educational moment for every human on earth of what bullying can be. Unfortunately, with teen dating, bullying is just so hybrid love. It's not love, though, woven like this to rally the troops, get followers, get people on your side to upset the person you wish to upset. Parents don't always know that this is going on. And I apologize for the harshness of that story, but this is what we're dealing with. This is real talk, real deal, real life. And we already know, I apologize, some of you may not know, that for Natives, suicide is 10 times the national average of other groups. So we're already facing some big challenges with services and intervention, and those numbers connected to historical trauma and all of the other things of what it is to live a Native life, 10 times the national average. So we have to really take teen dating violence to heart and do our work. And if our programs are structured and meant for adults, we've got to find a way to weave these in with us together because of this digital reality. There's another, harsh storyline. This goes back to safety planning of you working with youth and their parents or their guardians or the community. Also your own safety and your programs. I think in the last 10 years, our movement has changed so much. The silence is slowly being broken down. Survivor advocates are feeling brave enough and on their healing journey enough to do this work, right? We're getting there. And then we also have this really beautiful increase in men and boys engaging work, self-identified. Lots of people are doing engaging men and boys. It's beautiful and it's increasing. But there are challenges along with that we should know about when we're giving space to the men and boys, giving the space to the Two-Spirit Native LGBTQ communities. We can be supporters, do the logistics, offer them space, even use our funding to pay for space and bring them in. But some of the safety planning that I'd like you to just know about, if you haven't experienced the difficulties, this is a real storytelling, individuals that have done men and boys work as men, leaders in their community. They teach traditional medicines, traditional values, and do it from the perspective of manhood to boyhood, and naming ceremonies and first kill ceremonies and things like that. And this man was doing this work for a long time, and he went into a local store, and his life was threatened by a boy's father that He wanted to fight him. He wanted to hurt him. Why are you teaching my boy this wussy? S-H-I-T. I'm not going to disrespect Redwin by swearing, but why are you teaching him this wussy stuff? And he didn't use wussy. Threatened him, stay away from my kid. You're messing him up. I'm teaching him how to be a man. And all of this language that is the cycle of violence that a man can, or an adult can harm. And that means they're going steady, or that means there's a sense of ownership and power and control means you're entering manhood if you can be violent to a partner. So safety planning is crucial in all facets of your work, especially working with youth, because if a parent does not agree with you and you're in a small community, you can be identified as such. So that's just a comment I wanted to share. Okay, what else? So some other positive stories and ideas. Please feel free to type in the chat anything that you've done creatively in your community to keep the conversation going and provide prevention, education, and advocacy. There is a program in Alaska, remembering our relatives are all over. There's an organization called Dreamcatcher, and they very creatively, social distancing during the pandemic, created an arts and crafts. And I know Amber mentioned this too, that there are beading circle opportunities. You can do your seats 6 feet away if you need to. You can do it online if you need to, but just creating those spaces with incentives, gift cards, traditional teachings. And it doesn't have to be, February 2nd, we are going to talk about domestic violence in teens and not label it that, obviously. You can say, hey, let's have a beading circle or quill work or basketball tournaments. With the Native Love Project that I was a part of years ago, we held basketball tournaments at a boarding school. And that's how we wove in the conversation of teen dating. And we have to be prepared for disclosures. I've never done a youth event where I wasn't pulled aside in tears or not, because when you create a space they've never had before, you got to be ready to accept the space and then close it down in a healing way and not just, go back to your program. So having a team meeting before you have a youth event, calling the school, asking for faculty that are interested in helping to support the process and recommend student leaders in the honor society, that's Good Grades Honor Society or Traditional Values Honor Society, that you're bringing that in as a part of your planning, because youth know youth, and they could probably look and see that someone's having a hard time that we may not, because of their own youth culture. The word that keeps popping out to me while I look at this slide is bullying. At this day and age, that's not specific to youth or teens anymore. I would bet all of us could come forward with a story about being bullied last year or this year, with all of the difficulties and violence that's happening in the world and the political divides and all of the things that are going on. Bullying is one of the worst impacts of teen dating because of that social media impact. It's not one-on-one. Even with adults, it's not always one-on-one, but with teens and a teen relationship breaking down and having power and control in it, it's going to be a team effort. There's going to be other teams. And that's where that revenge porn comes. Send me a sexy picture. They're in a relationship. Someone sends a sexy picture and the revenge is sending that out like porn to the entire student body. It's a sad reality. And that has led to suicide in the world as well. So thank you, Amber. There's a comment here. Very powerful story. Suicide is very intertwined with teen dating. Do you have resources for suicide prevention? Yep, I can put that in the chat before we close out. There are Love is Respect. There is the Native Youth Sexual Assault. I'm going to have to Google it. I can't remember the name right now, but also Strong Hearts Native Helpline, just as resources that they have a full directory with all of those hybrid love intersections. Unfortunately, bullying is such a danger to their youth today, especially due to the pandemic. So thank you for that. Love is respect. Yep. And I will also post, let me write this down. I'll post the Dreamcatcher website and the Native. There's a Native youth organization, I think it's out of Seattle, that I have partnered with. So I will post those as resources for you. Another idea, actually, can we have the next slide? I'm going to take a breath for just a minute and a sip of water. And yes, I hope I don't mispronounce your name. Jovita or Hovita, yes, that's exactly right. Native Youth Sexual Health Network. Thank you so much. I was having a brain bubble. That's exactly right. A couple other ideas for this third topic of digital health and teen dating. You know, what are some ideas of how to create these new spaces and create these partnerships so suicide isn't such a threat, and substance abuse, isolation, internet bullying? One of the things, you know, you don't have to go so big. Some of us and some of you all are operating like champions in this movement. Your workloads are huge. You are in a pandemic. Your families are in a pandemic. You're working in the office or at home, and we know we're stretched. And life in general for all of our relatives has been very difficult on personal levels and professional, as are the people that we're working with. So when I share some of these making collaborative connections, it doesn't have to be overwhelming that how am I possibly going to get to it because you're so busy already. Many of us just completed our federal reports. So last week and the weeks prior, we're busy doing, you know, the administrative tasks on top of doing the top-down service tasks and work with our people. So it doesn't have to be a huge capacity building project where you need new funding. There's an example of doing small internet projects and make a poster, print it out, send it out on Facebook, very minimal funding, and advertise. You'll do a contest for a youth to hold up a sign or for youth to make a TikTok video, you know, a healthy relationships one. Say what you want to say. How do you keep yourself safe online? How would you help a friend? What does Native love mean to you? Are some really good examples. And do a voting process. Keep it simple. Pick the best one that had the best message with the best voice. And then you can create a junior board member position, voting or non-voting, depending on your program bylaws. Or they could be a youth ambassador to all of your work because they participated in what you were trying to do and brought forth a really positive response, and create an ambassadorship. And it really, your capacity, you don't need 8 hours a week or 40 hours a week to do this. It's really just building a partnership opportunity in your project. And that's something that I've seen done, and it's been very successful. The ambassadorship that we had created back in the day was from a young lady. She was a teenager, young teenager, and her response was so awesome that we were like, wow, we need to create something for this young woman. And she's been with the project for years and has done national radio shows, international podcasts. She helped us write toolkits. She's done interviews, public speaking at the Unity Conference and beyond. And it really gave her an opportunity to, you know, develop her public speaking and also talk teen to teen, because she led some of our circle groups with youth. And she was the leader of that conversation. It was awesome. And it didn't take a $500,000 grant to do that either. You know, we did that on bare bones and made it happen. Yes, thank you for the great resources. Okay, next slide, please. So I think we've already done this, but if you have more, please add. Teens and digital profiles. what is happening out there, and what tools do you know that will support youth? So we have quite a few. We have the Cyber Safety Cop. We have Love is Respect, Native Youth Sexual Health Network, Strong Hearts Native Helpline. I would also like to offer, I gotta look up the website. Native Love by the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. I'm gonna put it in the chat. And then, you know, some other of the topic specific, and you're welcome to email me. I'm happy to support. And Redwind. Amber, could you put your email in the chat too if they have specific requests for someone in connection to veterans or youth homelessness in a certain area? Anything that you can provide for your TA to the group. Thank you. Futures Without Violence is good. Yep. Any other thoughts? I'm just going to pause for a minute for a sip of water. Thank you, Brittany. Awesome. Thank you, Amber. Next slide, please. So we have another idea board. Miss Brittany, if you could post that in the chat.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So how have you addressed these changes in your outreach and program approaches? Is there anything that you could share or ideas of things that you dream to do outreach to youth? Thank you for posting, Brittany. Okay, we have a few. We have teaching youth what boundaries are and how to set them. And that could be a conversation in an elementary school, visiting your elementary school with the school as partners to start it very young, because some people are social media experts by the time they're 6 years old. So you can start at any age. Twitter town halls for youth engagement. Relationship green flag memes. If someone could add in the chat, I'm not familiar with green flag memes. If you could add that, that'd be awesome. Educate them through facilitations of the curriculum. Redwind has a curriculum. Yep, that's a great resource as well. There is a lot of people doing a lot of work in the background. That some of this may sound new, but there is a lot of resources that's long since been developed. It's a great go-to. Asking for a social media app for the program itself to have an opportunity to reach youth and parents. Our Youth Advisory Council has taken this on, which is great news. Yeah, the next one says discussing consent, and that's huge. We will be talking about that on February 16th of what an expansion on, you know, the basics of consent and withdrawing consent. Creating memes or TikTok content about healthy relationships. Again, someone had posted this in the last hour or so before, meeting youth where they're at. If they're on TikTok, that's where you can go to increase engagement. Yeah, thank you. We are Native. that's another one I forgot to mention. Sharing content from Healthy Native Youth and the We Are Native Project, which is great. TikTok, #trend, Native Talk. Developing a community school engagement program. Yep, and that does not have to be huge and beyond your capacity. It can be one-on-one content building together. Teachable moments, and using and sharing the consent like a YouTube video. Yep. YouTube is really big. My kid, yeah. So comment, I believe it is positive, the green flag memes, just the opposite of pointing. Oh, red flags, I gotcha. So green flags are the opposite of red flags. So we just wanna, instead of sharing difficult content or it being red flag, let's create more positive atmosphere and share more positivity out there. It can take on. And then getting out to the community while being in social distancing. Yes, thank you. And then if the PowerPoint could come back up, please. Thank you. Do we have another slide? I think we do. Awesome. So I just want to invite, it's 4 o'clock out east and it's been a long day. We're on this Zoom platform together. So I just want to invite everyone to take a deep breath and stretch for a minute. I like to shake my arms around just to wake myself up. I'm sorry if I'm just yammering on, but I know what it's like being on the internet, because it would be way cooler if we were together sharing space and feeling each other's energy and being energized with each other. So at the end of our time together, hopefully you had some storytelling, some real life, not disclosures, because I want to green flag this, positive and trusting, honest shares to inspire you that may have been your own story too, and you did not have to share, and I honor that too. But this is what our spaces are. Even in Indian country, we can be together and it can be great. We can come together like this because it's what we've got, and still expand our learning so that our youth know we're doing what we can to participate in their culture and find new ways to learn from them and with them. So we're not going into the school, which I've done, gone up in the auditorium in front of 300 kids and spoke at them. And that was my own learning experience. That's not what they need. That's a snoozeville. So I apologize if this is a bit snoozy online. But our takeaways, we want to keep educating ourselves on youth and community trends. And the only people that are going to know what's going on with the youth community trends are the youth. So build those relationships with your kids. If your kids are movement babies, keep lifting them up and supporting them on that journey. And then also youth will know who shows up at school and keeps their head down, who shows up at school that may not have the best clothes or shoes or are hungry the way they act at lunch. Youth know their culture and their community. And in those are youth leaders just waiting to be born. So hopefully one of the takeaways today is uplifting them. Also, we want to acknowledge their invisibility sometimes. Been there, right? And I know other youth in my community have reached out in private, and I had to maintain that privacy because their home was not safe. So keep yourself available and let the gossip about you be that you don't gossip and that you are a safe person, right? We know Indian country has a moccasin trail and people like to talk online or voice to voice. But if there's going to be gossip about you, let it be that you're trustworthy so people know they can come to you, right? And that's adults or youth. And also for those most vulnerable within the youth culture, those that are bullied by other youth, keep an eye on them. Another one, actively restore cultural identity that was brought in so often during our time together today. In some of the sessions like this I didn't do it today, but I read the 7 Lakota virtues as an opening of how we can share a space together. Sometimes it's relevant in a virtual space on Zoom, sometimes it isn't, but when we're face to face, I've been in meetings where people were screaming at each other, swearing at each other, slamming things, crying, isolated, people who just stopped talking. In the face-to-face space, I think it's really important to remind ourselves of how we are responsible to each other doing this work, and just restoring that through making some guidelines of how we share space. And that's really important for youth too. Maybe they write their own guidelines. Maybe it's not the 7 virtues or the 12 or whatever your tribe lists as the cultural values, but allowing the youth culture to identify, we're not going to do this in the space, and make their own list. So it's their guidelines, right? In any way you can as a program, keep trying to work with your team in your weekly team meetings or whenever you meet. How am I going to enhance our availability to youth? And let that be a growing working document that never is finished, that you're constantly adapting it. And it doesn't matter if it's the executive director, the board, the janitor, the advocate, whatever roles you have in your organization, everyone should have a say because they all have access to youth at some point. One of the other things we talked about, which I hope was a good takeaway, is that youth friends are youth family. And we haven't even gotten into the Two-Spirit or Native LGBTQ community of in a lot of ways, we've evolved as a global culture or tribal cultures, but there are still many families that if someone discloses that they are Two-Spirit or LGBTQ, they'll still be abused, tormented in school, and possibly kicked out or run away. So we will go down that a lot more on the 16th, but just please keep those most vulnerable in your heart and in your work, especially when you're in those team meetings. Okay, could we go to the next slide? I think there's only one left. So any questions out there or comments?
I just want to say, Rebecca, thank you so much for honoring both our children and youth in this way, coming together and having these hard conversations. You did a great job. And it's not easy to talk about things like suicide prevention and sexual assault with kids and the things that they're experiencing today and in the past. But it is important that we have these discussions, and you did it so well. And we just want to thank you at Red Wind for the conversation. And it's been fun listening to you talk and give out some really excellent resources to everyone. And we hope that you'll join us for the next call. And I just want to say, we're all navigating this together. There wasn't Google when we were kids. So one of the ways that we think about engaging youth is make them show you the technology. Ask them what, oh, this TikTok, what is that? Help me get one of those. And then, you know what? I helped my son get one. And then I was his only friend. And now I realized we only follow each other. And I'm his best TikTok friend. Like, that's awesome. I'm like, he shares videos of his basketball and skating, and it's just to me. And so I feel so special in that. And I hope that some of you can engage some of our youth in that way. And, another thought I had when you were talking, Rebecca, was just about having movie night and taking those opportunities. Someone had mentioned on one of the boards, teachable moments, and having those, opportunities when we're sitting down watching a movie, or purposefully put on an old movie that you've watched a million times and probably, I wouldn't say totally inappropriate, but has some teachable moments in it that you can sit down and, geez, why is that why is that inappropriate? Why would you never let that happen? How can we make changes? Or old movies that show some of the things that we've been through and start having those topic conversations on generational and historical trauma and how we're all healing together. And none of us own this information, but are just here to share it. And I wish that some of our elders on the call, by all means, we are so grateful to have you here, and thank you for joining us. And don't mean to disrespect you in any way or talk over any of you, because you all teach me so much, and think about our grandmothers and grandfathers that have taught us all so much every generation and have passed it down, because we wouldn't be here without a lot of the work that people like Victoria, Ybanez, and Vicky had to jump off the call, but she's our director and she's a founder in this work. She's been doing this work as long as I've been alive. And I wouldn't be able to speak about my experience if it wasn't for people like her educating people like myself to do better work. And so just really grateful for all of you for coming today. And Rebecca, again, thank you so much for your comments, and your presentation today was very informative and just brought a lot of good conversation from me anyways. And I know some of you are probably just listening in, but that's great. I'm glad you listened, and I hope that you learned stuff, and we hope you join us for Rebecca's next talk with us on the 16th. If anyone has anything else to add, please join in.
Thank you for that, Amber. Yeah, 50 people, a little bit lower sometimes, a little bit higher sometimes, stayed on to just listen. And I really am grateful for your comments. Sometimes I join trainings where I'm in listening mode. And I appreciate that, because you stayed on and you heard maybe something new. But, Zoom fatigue is real, and it's really scary to turn on your camera and turn on your audio, but the comments have been really helpful. And for those, I hope we did right by you today. Wopi Latanka, thank you so much.
Alrighty, do we have any last minute questions before we wrap up? Alrighty.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Amber, for presenting for us today. As a reminder, this training was recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel within a few days. So if you're interested in rewatching this presentation or watching any of the others we've made, you can find them there. There is also an eval that was just posted into the chat. We'd very much appreciate hearing what you thought about the presentation. So if you were able to just take a few minutes and fill that out, we'd very much appreciate it. But to wrap up, I'd like to thank our presenters. I'd like to thank all the captioners we had today. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope you all stay safe. And I hope to see you all at the next training.
Thank you, Hanovi and Brittany. You guys did awesome. We appreciate our Red Wind technical assistants and monitors. You guys do awesome work. Thank you.
Thank you.